Game development and running a studio and things like that, it's not just the hard skills, such as having to program the game, having to make art for your game, having to do 3D modeling, or even some of the less like quantifiable hard skills such as marketing your game. But there's so many more skills that come to play with it. And in this video, I want to talk about 3 skills that I think are extremely overlooked, or that you probably don't really know the name of, don't really think about that they are skills that you should learn. And these are also skills that aren't that hard to learn once you know that they're skills that you should learn. It's like you don't know what you don't know. So here I am trying to get you to know what you don't really know and give you some tips as well on getting better at those often overlooked skills. The first skill I want to talk about is asset management. And by that, I don't mean managing the 500 different Cinti assets or Unity assets or any other asset that you got on sales basically, and you have no clue when you'll actually be using them anytime soon. You always just thought they were cool. No, I'm talking about a different kind of asset here. I'm talking mainly about the assets of time, skill, and money. Those are 3 big assets that you need to manage. And the best way to describe this is, you know the game like Game Dev Tycoon, where you have the little sliders of, I want to put this much effort into programming, this much into the art, and this much into optimization or whatever. Those same sliders also exist for things like, how long am I gonna work on my game? How much time do I have to work on my game? Do I have money to work on my game? Where do I spend it and things like that? And I wanna go over all 3 of them very quickly. So the first one I wanna talk about is time management. This basically boils down to how much can you work hour-wise and when can you work? Maybe it's only in weekends, maybe it's only during the week in like the evenings when your kids are asleep already. And time is actually one of the biggest factors, especially if you're a solo developer, to figure out how long am I going to have to develop my game until it's done, and how much am I actually able to work on it. If you only have 5 hours a week versus you have 20 hours a week that you are able to get, you're going to be much more efficient. Similar with, okay, do I have like some blocks of like 2-3 hours where I can work uninterruptedly versus, oh, I have to squeeze in half hours of game dev here and there, so it probably won't be as efficient because I spent like 5 minutes waiting for Unity to start. Those are things that you need to manage. And time management here, there are like plenty of very deep dive topics in time management itself. My thing here is you need to really manage yourself like you're a strategy game character. And it's like, okay, I can only do this many things at the same time. I need to know which ones are my priority and what tasks should I work on in certain blocks of time. Maybe if you have that one deep 3-hour block, you want to do some very intensive programming where you get into the zone and you just program a mechanic or a large part of a mechanic in that single block, versus if it's something like, hey, I have multiple half-hour blocks, you probably won't be programming a giant mechanic, but maybe you're doing some smaller assets, you're making some icons or like some little sprites. Knowing what kind of work you should do and what kind of time slot is actually a very important skill to have. And then the second asset you can manage is money. If you're working on some of your first games, probably you won't have like thousands of dollars to just blast on your game, which means that you really have to think about what is worth spending money on and what isn't worth spending money on. There are a few things that I personally think that you should always spend money on instead of trying to figure it out yourself. And it's things like getting promo art done for your game, so like your Steam capsules. I'm actually planning a video where I talk more about the general rules and the things I've learned about capsule design as well. So go ahead down below and subscribe if you're interested in that. But it doesn't have to be art. It can even be things that you are technically good at, but it would just cost you a lot of time. So maybe you're a good programmer, but you want to make a game that is not like the most crazy. You want to make an FPS. At that point, you may want to have to ask yourself, is it worth putting hundreds of hours into creating my own FPS controller, dealing with movement, dealing with hitboxes, dealing with like lag compensation if you're doing multiplayer? Or is it actually better off to just get like the 100, 200 euros or whatever and buy an actual pre-made Unity template for an FPS game, for example? Those are things where, hey, if you have 0 money, okay, look, you probably will have to do it yourself. But if you have some money, really think about how much time you can get saved by correctly utilizing the limited money pool that you have. Or maybe you're working on your game and you've got that first prototype nailed down, but you feel like there's something missing. You can try and just get one character, your main character that your player is always looking at. Get that one custom commissioned in the style you want and use Cinti characters for all of the rest of your game until you maybe have more of an idea that, hey, this is actually a good game. Or you find some other ways to fund before you turn all of those other characters into your final style. And it's not just tools that you can buy, such as, for example, those frameworks. I also want to give a quick plug to yours truly, me. If you think like, hey, this is the first game I'm ever making, and this guy here, Marnix, he has made so many mistakes, I don't want to do all of the same mistakes that he did. Head down, there's a link down below where you can actually get coaching, where I can walk you through in like an hour or whatever, walk you through your game, and we're going to figure out all of the mistakes that you will probably make if you have no clue what you're working on. And once again, it's like, sure, it costs a little bit upfront, but the amount of time that you save because of it and the amount of setbacks and just the mental drain that those setbacks bring with it as well can be a really worthwhile investment if you have those sufficient monetary assets. It's always going to be a balance of how much do I feel like I can just power through myself, and how much is it like, okay, I have this money, I have some security, let me buy some of my time back that I would have otherwise spent on something completely different, and let's just save that time so I can use it on other things by spending a bit of money. You generally have a pretty good return on investment when you do those small and like very focused purchases. They're usually up to like $200 at most. And then if you do have a lot of budget, well, then you can look into maybe things like employees, where you get someone to actually work for your studio with all of their skills on a more like 20 to 40 hour a week basis, with a contract, with some more like obligations around it. And that's when we pivot into our third kind of management. And this is one that I'm very familiar with, namely skill management. So this is one that if you're in a team, you're going to have to deal with. Skill management is pretty easy. In our studio, we're 4 people. We all graduated from the exact same university degree. Like that's where we got to know each other, and that's where we found basically our teammates for this studio. But even though we have that exact same diploma, that exact same education, we still have different skills, we still have different talents. For example, I'm pretty decent on camera, but other people in our team maybe aren't as good on camera. They don't really feel as confident. Or I'm also just not that good of a programmer. Thomas and William are much better programmers. And this is where you get that role of the producer, where you're going to actually find out what is everyone's best skill and how am I going to accommodate that whatever work they're doing makes sure that they're going to be doing that. If Thomas and I were forced to switch roles for a week, he had to make YouTube videos and I had to start programming our games, we probably wouldn't be making any progress on either front, because we don't have as much affinity with it. We don't have as much prior experience with it, and this has cost us a lot as well with Songs Overjade, for example, where we didn't really understand our skills, and it meant that William was like, I'm going to make all of the pixel art for our game. But then like a month, 2 months in, he realized that, hey, actually, I do not have the skills required to be a good pixel artist. I'm actually a much better programmer. So we should learn from that. We shouldn't make games that are like extremely art heavy and very light on programming, because then we're not harnessing the skills of the entire team correctly. So figure out, if you're working in a team, what is everyone's skill? And it's not just like, oh, I'm a good programmer or I'm a good artist. There are like sub-skills even in that you can look for as well. In our studio, we have 2 programmers, but one of them, Thomas, is really good at the overall design and architecture of our game. Like, how does everything interact with each other? Whilst the other one, William, he's faster at actually writing code that works once it's been defined of what it's supposed to do. So there also we look at, okay, William and Thomas, they will have different kinds of issues that they work on whilst working on the exact same game and both programming. So you have to figure out as the producer, how do I utilize everyone in my team? How do I manage their skills? And how do I get my party, so to say, working as efficiently as possible? All right, so that was a pretty long first one. The second one is a lot shorter, and I call this one image manipulation. So this is something that I've mentioned previously as well, but I think that every game developer should have some knowledge of Photoshop or another kind of pretty in-depth image manipulation platform. So it could be something like Krita, could be something like Affinity Photo as well, or there's plenty of other ones. Basically having somewhat advanced ways to already mask, to use things like lasso tools, layering your files and things like that, because there are so many small things that I personally use Photoshop for a lot, and it's things that aren't groundbreaking, but things like, for example, throwing some images together, neatly cutting out certain parts into a bigger piece of concept art, for example. You take a background from one image and then you try to seamlessly blend it somewhat with a foreground or with some other things that you've plucked off the internet to get some idea of, okay, how would this game look? Because even I know you guys are AI bros as well, but even AI, I find, doesn't make the perfect concept in one image. So I still end up stitching together multiple kinds of AI images in that platform, such as Photoshop or such as Krita or whatever, just to figure out how it does look, does this work? And it's not just getting concept art. I think one of the biggest wins you can do in order to get their Steam page up as fast as possible is make your capsule art yourself. I don't think the actual assembly of the Steam capsule art is that hard once you have a good piece of promo art. That's what we did with Forge Industry. We had one big image commissioned that was like our dwarf hammering on the anvil. And from then on, Steam provides you with a bunch of Photoshop templates that you can just work on your own. You put the big piece of promotional art in there and then you play around with typographic fonts, you play around with the exact placement of your logo, of your text and things like that. But it's not that hard. It takes like 1 to 2 hours at most. And I've literally made capsule images in 60 seconds just from a screenshot, and that's it. You can go really fast with those things if you have a little bit of that affinity with how to use those image manipulation programs. And then the last skill that I think a lot of you are decent at, but there are some people as well that I feel like need to be aware of this being a skill, and that is research. At first I wanted to call this learning, but I think learning and research are two different things. The way I see it, learning is figuring out, like in general, how does game development work? How do I like design my games in Unity, for example? How does everything interact with each other? Whereas research is more of a thing of, hey, I'm stuck on this one very specific problem. How do I solve it? So basically, this used to be very simple. You just Googled it. But I think especially now, Google isn't always the best option anymore. There's a lot of SEO garbage right now, if you ask me. Honestly, I don't Google that much anymore. Or you go to like forums that have been dead and that have never answered a question or that have gone offline, for example. So I think if you are struggling with like a very specific problem, there are actually better ways to get around it now instead of just Googling the issue. If you're working with anything like code-wise related, hands down, number one thing you should ask is like ChatGPT the question. Just give it your code block and be like, this is the problem I'm dealing with, or this is what I want to get to as an end result. And it's probably going to be able to give you better pointers than just trying to Google it, because your issues are very specific usually. It's not something that many people have done before. But that's of course for programming. I think what has surprised me the most is I'm someone who does not really like shorts. I don't really like the short form content, but I think they're really great for getting answers to very specific questions that aren't that hard. Back in the old days, when I wanted to find out, okay, how do I rig a character, or I want to make an animation in Unity or import a sprite or whatever that's animated, I would go into YouTube and like look it up, and it's like a 7-minute video. And I'm like, my brother in Christ, I do not need 7 minutes for something that I know is taking 10 seconds. So what short form content has really pushed for is, okay, you have 60 seconds at most, after which you should have an answer. I really like this. This is, okay, a very unrelated tangent. If you want to like cook something, honestly, I just look up like recipes in shorts basically, and not the long ones anymore, because I don't need to know how your mother passed down this recipe for generations down upon you. I just need to know what are the ingredients, in what order do I combine them, and how do I move on as fast as possible, make that cake, make that model rigged, make it like do a little Fortnite dance or whatever, and then keep working on my game. So I think don't sleep on shorts in terms of finding answers to questions. There are a lot of very good shorts out there as well that you probably won't find whilst regularly scrolling, because it's not the content that's really engaging unless you are specifically looking for it. But it is content that is very good on the return on investment of how much time you put into it versus the result that you get out of it. And then the last thing, if those things don't work, go to communities such as Discord. ChatGPT is great for like knowing a lot of data, but it's not always the most human, and sometimes it's kind of dumb and it gives you broken code or it doesn't understand what you're trying to do. Having something like a Discord server where you can go in and you're like, hey guys, I'm working in Unity, this is the problem I have, does anyone know what's going wrong? Or things that an AI isn't as good as. You have a piece of pixel art, for example, and you feel like there's something wrong, but you can't put your finger on it. You don't really know where it goes wrong exactly. Going to any Discord server, putting that screenshot of whatever you're working on and be like, hey guys, where am I messing up? Can someone help me out here? And how would I do a quick win to get it working? is going to be very fast as well. This is of course where I am legally obliged to push our own Discord server as well. Once again, that is also linked down below. We're over 1,700 people at this point, all game developers. It's a really chill community. And if you have any questions about either an engine or about visuals or about marketing, there are people in there who will be able to help you. Hell, I'm even in there. I'll help you if you have a question about it. So I think that's also a really great place to join. But anyways, those were some of the skills that in my opinion are kind of often overlooked. I'm very curious about you. What are some skills that you personally think that, hey, once I knew that I didn't know these skills before and I could actually go and work towards bettering them, it has really improved my game dev workflow, or it doesn't even have to be game dev, it has improved your life or your whatever. Let me know in the comments down below. I'm really interested to learn from you guys. I'm also nowhere near perfect yet. I'm learning new things every day. You guys help me with that. Thank you so much for that. Apart from that, if you're new here, we're game developers. We've made our own game. We're working on our next games, and we just want to share the journey of starting our own studio, making our games, and just giving you as much information about the entire process as possible. If that's something that interests you, be sure to head down below and subscribe, as we upload these videos twice a week, and I think you're gonna get some value out of it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!